me tell you about Mr. Salek. I'm very pleased to welcome what we're calling our keynote speaker, John, who has been the Vice President of Business Services of Order to Cash, boy, that's a mouthful, at Genpact. John supports Genpact's Order to Cash transformation, re-engineering, and portfolio cleanup solutions. Now, you can see by his picture, he's got lots of experience, more than 25 years, both developing solutions and implementing those for the client. He's worked with over 150 companies in his years of doing this. But John is also an author, and he's the co-author of the Accounts Receivable Management Best Practices, published by John Wiley. We're very pleased to welcome John, and we didn't even mention that he's got an MBA from that wonderful school in Dartmouth, New Hampshire. So John, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Henry, and welcome everyone, and pleased to have this opportunity to review what I think is some interesting that stimulate your thinking and maybe challenge a little bit of the status quo. So quickly, a quick introduction, a review of how I would define the order to cash process, which I'm sure is not going to vary much from your vision. Then let's take a look at the future. Where do we think it's going? And then we'll visit some best practices today and tomorrow. Some of those best practices will endure. They won't change. They're fundamental building blocks of order to cash, but others will change, and then if we have a little time, we can get into some more detail in the appendix. So again, we're going to look at the nature of the process. As I mentioned earlier, there are some fundamentals that are not going to change, and there will be some that do change, and we'll look at those. Quickly, the definition. You see those chevrons at the top. These are what we think are the 8 key segments of the order to cash process. Various people say there's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Sometimes quotation is added to this, and it's called the quote to cash process. But those are really minor differences. If we look at the what's the objective or the mission statement? Well, basically this process takes an order from a customer and converts it into 2 good things. One is cash, the other is satisfied customer. It really starts after the sale is made, subject to that qualification on quote to cash. And when does it end? Well, when everything's wrapped up. Order's been fulfilled, been billed, paid, and the customer account's updated. And certainly when the O2C process is operating well, the benefits are many. It's cash, it's customer sat, cost, which is always on everyone's mind. I'm sure you hear about it more than you want. Reduction in revenue dilution, and that's a science in and of itself. Basically, it's what is revenue dilution? The easiest way to define that is if you bill $100 in sales, how much do you ultimately collect? Is it 99, 98? 93, 92, and that varies by industry. There's a lot of nickel and diamond that goes on out there. And then faster order fulfillment. The objectives. Well, here I break it down into front end and back end of this process. At its base level, the front end, contract admin, order management, credit check, this is really a screen for getting acceptable orders. I call it the gatekeeper function. The only orders you want to flow to your company's fulfillment operation, whether that be manufacturing, distribution, professional services, are what we would call perfect orders. What are perfect orders? Well, they're priced right. They're for a product or service you can deliver. And I laugh when I say that because I have worked for and consulted to companies where that's not the case. And clearly that raises havoc with the order to cash process. The customer information's right, the price is right, all that stuff. So only the perfect orders go in, and if you can achieve that, then the rest of the process runs very smoothly and very successfully. And then once that enables your organization to fulfill these orders quickly, accurately. The back end, the back end, a lot of people say, oh, the back end is to get that cash in and get it in as fast as possible and no exceptions, no prisoners. Well, yes and no. Maybe a more macro view is ultimately what last four functions are trying to do is to keep your customer's credit status to condition in the flow of services. I mean, you've got the whole sales organization out there trying to generate orders, hopefully profitable orders, and you don't want to be holding them up unnecessarily. Clearly, there's times when you have to, but ultimately, you want to keep that product service flow going so your company can make money. That's why years ago a number of, quote, credit and collection departments are there certainly. That's all these operations need to be done quickly, accurately, and efficiently. I would call a heavy action. It is, okay, big ticket items. So we said, look, you know what, let's take 10 orders, I'll say that, and the ultimate voice that goes to the customer. Not the technical specs of commercial out point. And if allowed to first line of defense, the gatekeeper function with the customers to what the piece of freight, is it taxable? On revenue. Got to continue to serve those customers with excellence. No excuses, no change in that. I mean, customer service with many vendors and fewer customers, customer service is going to be a premium. Most companies want to minimize their investment in AR and maximize the cash flow. Now, they want to do that, but they also want to serve customers, encourage repeat business, promote revenue. So here's another illustration of the trade-off. And every management's favorite objective, minimize cost. It's the old end-of-year review. Hey, I see you got the DSO down by 3 days. The past due reduced. That was a great year, but that was then and this is now. We're in a new year. Can you do the same or better or lower cost? So this, the other panel is, remember, it's transaction processing. The order to cash process involves a lot of transactions, and there's no getting away from it. They have to be done accurately, quickly, efficiently, minimal or zero backlogs. So that's the fundamentals that we expect to continue, and also the pressure, quite honestly. All right, but what's going to change? Well, tried to categorize these changes, and I don't have a crystal ball, but I do hear a lot, see a lot, get involved with a lot of different companies as clients. Certainly this whole, with technology, software as a service, an emerging, more than emerging trend. It's pretty well down the road, but just offers great benefits for the customer. Don't have to worry about new releases, upgrades, new versions. It's just kind of a continuously improving product that you're using. Best of breed. This is a classic debate that's raged for years. As we've seen consolidation in the ERP applications to Oracle and SAP, the IT organizations tend, their opening position and their preference is stay with just SAP modules, just SAP functionality. We don't want any bolt-ons, any specialized applications that are not SAP, because it complicates our servicing, our maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. But that's the IT voice. From the user community, again, with the pressure on cost, the pressure on effectiveness, we're hearing the finance organizations pushing back and saying, well, that's a nice concept, but I want the best of breed application. I mean, if I'm expected to work miracles with the same or lower headcount and cost as last year, then I need the best application that I can. So we're seeing more and more of that out there. E-commerce, in some respects, e-commerce has been around a long time. EDI, you could call credit card, debit card, P-cards, all that stuff. We've been seeing it for years, and there's been some pretty good adoption. There's a whole new range of things, which I'm sure Henry could expound on a lot better in terms of payments, payment technologies, mobile devices, that sort of thing. And we just see that growing, where 20 years ago, EDI was the tool for big buyers doing business with big sellers. Now with all of the internet, web portal, mobile device applications out there, e-commerce is going to the small and medium-sized business, and certainly to the consumer as well. So expect that trend to continue, less paper, more electronic transactions. And that's really the next point, replacement of paper. Hey, I started my career with international paper. We're seeing it with the newsprint manufacturers. We're seeing it with a number of paper providers. Its volume is dropping. Something I alluded to earlier, orders and payments from the mobile devices. My last trip to the doctor, he submitted a prescription on his handheld device. We've worked with some of the prescription fulfillment companies, and they still have to have fax machines, and they still get mail, and that sort of thing. But more and more, it's moving to on-the-run mobile devices. I mean, my doctor had submitted the prescription before I left. So it just gives you a sense what's going on out there. And then the other trend that's going to continue is increased customer self-service via the web. That's always packaged nicely. In one respect, it's, if you need an invoice copy, don't call me. Go on the web and get it yourself. You would never say that, but it's kind of I think the driving force behind it is, get your documentation from the web, enter your order on the web. You can check the status of the order. I was expecting it Valentine's hours in Connecticut, but we had 30 inches of snow, and as we speak, that delivery has not been done, and I'm running out of time here, but I check that status on the UPS website. I don't call anybody, I just check it. So
we feel really bad for you.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
you're going to be hot water come tomorrow.
Yeah, well, if it doesn't go, I won't go home tomorrow. That's all it is, But it does illustrate the point. I mean, it was ordered online. I'm checking the status of the delivery online. So, and I think you're going to see more and more of that as time goes on, and not just the consumer and not just the big company, but the small and medium-sized business as well. So technology, clearly it's been a big driver for 50 years, and it's going to continue to be so. The next thing is globalization of business. One, from a customer standpoint, and two, from a workforce. Let me talk about customers. I happened to go to a seminar on international business a few months ago, and there were some interesting, actually surprising statistics on the number of companies that have exported and those that haven't. The percent of companies that have exported is actually pretty high, 70–80%. But what was surprising to me is the number of companies that have exported to customers in more than one country was much, much lower. So it seems like some of these companies happy to get a customer or open a new market, but then kind of stop there and maybe are a little daunted by the customs and documentation and credit risk, etc., and have not really expanded their market penetration to many countries. So I think you're going to see that as people get hungry for revenue and are continue to be hungry for revenue, I think you're going to see a greater globalization of your customer base and also the workforce. You know, we're all familiar with outsourcing, but more than that, particularly in order to cash, with language requirements, with customer contact, having local order to cash people in local markets can be very, very helpful. Now that kind of runs a little counter to the whole centralization trend for economies and standardization of process. But what we're seeing is we're seeing a balance there. Some functions can be centralized and flourish that way. Others need to be a little closer to the customer, and especially with the language requirements. But, you know, globalization, we've seen it, and we're going to see more and more of it. Next trend we see, what's really going to change, is the specialization. And this kind of goes back to the comments under technology on best of breed. You know, it used to be a line of thinking in human resource that, you know, if you give somebody a job that has many diverse functions, it's more interesting, it's more rewarding, and you'll probably have less attrition. But you sacrifice, I think, efficiency and effectiveness that comes from specialization. If you really just focus on a few activities and you do them every day, your proficiency increases significantly. And with the pressure on cost, the pressure on results, we're seeing more and more specialization out there. And certainly with electronic commerce and the ability to send and receive information instantaneously, there are functions that don't need to be local, don't need to be near the customer. And there, if you can aggregate volume, you can get this specialization and pick up the efficiency benefits. And then the last vision as to what will change is what I call revenue hunger, you know, the new normal. You know, we have, here's a good example. If you look at the pharmaceutical manufacturers, a lot of their big selling products are losing patent protection. And when they move status, the price goes down roughly 80%. So, you know, Pfizer had Lipitor for cholesterol, and I think that was up to 10, 12 billion global sales. Well, that 12 is going to turn into about 2 or 1. Well, that's a big hit. That's a big hit. So it's that type of evolution and competition that drives what I call revenue hunger. And what's revenue hunger? Well, it's generally we need more, and we'll accept more risk, more credit risk to get that revenue. And that's going to directly impact the order to cash function, you know, especially the credit function. And what we're going to see is new business models, new ways of doing business. We're going to see new products and services. We talked about the new markets, not only geographic but customer segments. You know, you see a lot of companies out there that basically had minimum order quantities, and their customer base was large and medium-sized companies. Well, now they're doing business with small companies, small orders, more transactions for the same revenue. And that translates into a greater need for efficiency. Again, do more business with the same number of people, with the same dollar of cost. And ultimately, that's going to lead to, I think, higher levels of bad debt and certainly higher levels of delinquency. Sometimes senior management doesn't want to acknowledge that, but you know, ultimately, I think we're going to see that. So that's what we're seeing in the future. Certainly continued technology change, globalization, specialization, and revenue hunger. And revenue hunger is something you're going to feel every day, and you probably do already. What's the vision of the future for the, quote, perfect order-to-cash process organization? Well, there's a few dimensions, a few attributes that I'd like to address here. One is ownership. You know, if different parts of the company own different segments of the order-to-cash process, or there's different owners in different countries, different markets, that's something we would call fragmented. What do we see in the future? Much more concentrated ownership with what we call a global process owner. Now this person, this role, is kind of what it describes. They own the order-to-cash process throughout the globe where they work. They're responsible for ensuring that best practices are used, as standardized as possible. There's always local market exceptions, but standardization, best practices, best technology, global dashboards, finger on the pulse, all those types of things. And what it gets you is, as it says in that purple box there, much greater end-to-end accountability and control. You know, that's another thing we're seeing is much greater emphasis on compliance all across the board. So the ownership helps that. Having one global process owner certainly promotes that type of improvement. Then the next dimension here is the organization centralized or decentralized? We talked about this a little bit already. It's always, you know, there's no one model that works for all companies and all industries, you know. But the greater degree of centralization, the greater the efficiency. You can get the best practices, you can standardize them, much better controlled, managed, and measured, and what I say here is expertly managed, because then you need fewer leaders. You can afford to get maybe more experienced, more capable leaders if running a centralized organization versus a decentralized one. So we see a high degree of centralization as being beneficial. Lower left-hand quadrant, we talk about process standardization. Hey, more is better. More is better. I'm convinced that the more process standardization, the better the efficiency, the better the effectiveness, allowing for absolutely necessary local variations. And I think the key here is what's a valid variation and what isn't. I always raise the issue. You got to be able to distinguish between inconveniences and obstacles. So if there's a standard process that is a real obstacle, then you need to change it, make an exception. If it's an inconvenience, stay with the standard process. Next part of the vision of future technology, we talked about that a little bit already. Where does it manifest itself? Well, certainly for collections, you need a good tool. You need an integrated collection dispute tool. And the benefits there, I think, have been proven, and you end up with a best of breed. You're in probably good shape. Now, what's that best of breed? Many products out there, many opinions. I won't get into that. Order receipt. No reason for order receipt not to be have a high level of e-commerce, particularly among the large and medium-sized businesses, and actually consumer segments as well. Invoice delivery. Should be delivering that invoice electronically too. Not going to save the post office if you keep printing and mailing invoices. So certainly electronic delivery is a big cost saver. Pick up speed, and actually once customers use it, customers like it. Dispute receipt. Interestingly, there should be a web portal out there where your customer can get a copy of the invoice, pay it, and dispute it. You know, nobody likes disputes, but the sooner you learn about them, the sooner they get resolved. Payments from customers, remittances. There's already a lot of modes out there. Again, most over time, that optimal order-to-cash process is going to have a very high percentage of payments coming in electronically. Typically, you can get some good cash application efficiencies here. There's still some modes, wire transfers and all, where the remit information is a little sketchy, but when you talk about self-serve, the customer selects what invoice they want it applied to and which one they're paying. So that's a big pickup there. And then the auto application can go up to some nice rates there in the 80s and 90s. And then the last one is the metrics and reporting. Always a challenge for a lot of companies. It tends to be a little fragmented. The best practice is a global dashboard. Boy, if you can, global real-time dashboard. Boy, if you can see that, a manager can see that on a global basis. They're on top of everything and see where the problems are. All right, so that's where we are on the what I see going in the future. How the best order-to-cash process and organization will evolve. This next section here, best practices. One of the things we covered earlier is that, listen, there's some fundamentals that aren't going to change. They're going to stay the same. But as we look at best practices today and tomorrow, a lot of the difference between today and tomorrow is just evolution. So we talk, for example, organization, centralized today, well, centralized and globalized tomorrow. Where functional skills are and will remain important, the more evolved organization is going to have more customer-related skills. Take collections, for example. There's a big difference between collecting from a small business and collecting from Walmart. You need to understand the web portal that Walmart affords its vendors, and you have to be skilled in using that. That's one skill as opposed to dialing for dollars. We look at process. Everyone has their metrics. They got to meet their key performance indicators. We see the evolution of that process and those KPIs being aligned with the company's order-to-cash strategy. What is the order-to-cash strategy? Is it to serve everybody, take every order, easy credit like the used car dealer on the corner? Or is it something different? Well, that has to be articulated. Once that's articulated, the process can be attuned to that strategy, the metrics, the staffing, the skill sets. And again, we talked about standardization. Everyone likes it. I think in the future, still see a lot of standardization, but it's got to be flexible because of this revenue hunger. We're going to see new business models all the time. Technology, we kind of talked about some of this before, ERP, but with a heavy dose of best of breed. Automated operations evolving to really automated operations, which just means a higher degree of automation. Metrics, the fragmented regional by division, by country to a global dashboard. Reporting pack today may serve your needs very, very well. But as you get new businesses, new customer segments, new business models, you're probably going to need to revisit your metrics because they're going to change as well. And there's a lot of examples of that. Customer master, this is a science in and of itself. It can be a little bit of a dull science, but again, if your customer master is operating well and is accurate, it just facilitates efficiency in all the other operations. So what do we see in the future with customer master? Is automated data cleansing, identifying some duplicates, getting some of your data verified by third parties, and certainly restricted access, more tightly controlled. You don't want novices in navigating around your customer master changing stuff. You don't want your sales force changing stuff in the customer master. Credit scoring, just faster, online, automated scoring to really set up the decision for the credit manager. All that kind of hustling and bustling to secure credit information, analyze it. Going to see more and more of that automated. Order holds. Remember, one of the objectives of order to cash is to ensure an uninterrupted supply of product and service to your customers. Well, order holds, to really be good at that, yet still hold the orders that need to be held, have to have a little more sophisticated hold function here with some of the features that I list here. Contract, you know, again, this is a big area where you move from paper to imaged contracts. And the more sophisticated your indexing, the faster and easier it is to get the information you're looking at. Keystrokes are going are out of fashion. Certainly mass updates capabilities are essential to have a good contract admin function in the future. Order management, you know, OCR is a big help for those faxed and hard copy orders, but I think we're going to see more and more electronic and orders placed over mobile devices. And you know, the metrics I think are going to evolve. You know, a lot of metrics we see are how many orders did you deliver by the promise date, and in many cases companies measure the promise date that they give as opposed to the customer's requested date. What we're advocating is what we call a perfect order index. That's every order, the percent of orders that are delivered accurately, completely, billed accurately, and by the customer's request date, not by the vendor's promise date. Billing, we talked about e-commerce there. We certainly see that as the best practice of the future. And accuracy, yeah, there's accuracy and there's ultra accuracy. If your organization can get to that 99% level, many other functions will go a lot easier. And then collections, just more sophistication, more segmented treatments and strategies for different customer groups, and a more customer self-service out there. Cash App, same themes, right? Most companies have AutoCash now. Well, let's get those AutoCash hit rates increased. Let's get more of the remittances and remit advice coming in electronically. Disputes and deductions, too often this falls into the finance area as their function. It really needs to be a company-wide function. A dispute needs to be seen as a customer satisfaction issue, not as an AR collection issue. And then to the degree you can analyze your disputes as to the types, categories, root causes, then you can start to correct them and have fewer disputes. All right, I kind of rushed through at the end. I'll follow the themes we outlined earlier. I would open the floor for questions now.
Thanks, John. We do have some questions for you. First question is about the slides. Will we have access to the slides? And yes, you will. Is that right, Brad? Everyone has access to the slides after session up for you. Another question comes from Luis. And John, he said that, you know, a lot of your comments were related to manufacturing. Luis works for a media company in the tech industry. Do you have any examples of some of the best practices that work better in the services industry?
Well, yes, and I think Luis raises a good point. I try to avoid that focus on a tangible as opposed to a service. But, you know, services, professional services, the fundamentals still apply, but with a slightly different twist. When we talk about delivery, well, delivery of the service is prone to dispute, right? I mean, you order from Staples a case of Bic pens, they arrive, and, you know, they're what you wanted or they're not. But, you know, you start talking about legal services, consulting services, talk about advertising. Did it deliver the audience that was promised? That sort of thing. there's some gray area there, much more subject to dispute. But the fundamentals of delivery, the fundamentals of the service, the fundamentals of invoicing accurately apply just as strongly in the service industry as well. What I would just say quickly on the service industry, I would say to the earlier note, you really need a good dispute resolution process and automated tool in the service industry.
How true that is. We see exception or dispute rates in the professional service industry approaching 10% of invoices, which obviously can have a tremendous impact on day sales outstanding.
Yep.
Depends on the billing process, as Luis obviously knows. It's a great comment. Very different than managing an exception in a discrete manufacturing environment. You either got the goods or you're not, or they're damaged. Perhaps we have a unit of measure issue, but the service is a whole host of other opportunities. We're going to talk a little bit about that in the last session. John, I had a question about how you see the market shifting now that organizations are growing again, but their appetite for revenue hunger, I love the way you said that, has not changed. In other words, we hear constantly from managers, I'm being asked to grow our business with less. In other words, I can't get any more people. How do we do it?
Well, it's making use of best-of-breed automation tools, which really aren't that expensive. It's getting customers, getting more of your transactions to be conducted electronically. Those are probably the two keys to efficiency. And with my second point there, customers trading electronically, there's always the adoption challenge. You can invest in electronic invoicing. You can invest in customer portals. And those are great tools, but you got to get your customers to use them. And there's kind of a whole change management adoption effort that's required. Customers have to get the same message from your company, regardless of to whom they speak, about the using electronic commerce. Gently reminded, encouraged, that sort of thing. And then the other way to do it is, of course, some financial incentive. Here's a good example. Had a client, it was a software company, and of course, one of their big revenue streams and most profitable is the monthly tech support maintenance. Customers prefer to be billed monthly for this, and it's a lot of small transactions. This company did was two good things. One is they offered a little discount. If you get an annual invoice, you get 2% off. If it's semi-annual, you get 1.5% off, and if it's quarterly, you get 1%. If it's monthly, it's got to be direct debit. So there's, and then just getting all as you can debit. A nice technique they use is, every year they raise the price of support. So they say, all right, Henry, your support's going up 5% this year, but if you enroll in direct debit, it's going up 4%. And they had over a quarter of their monthly tech support revenue on direct debit. So you close the books, and on the 3rd of the month, you press a button, and all this cash gets transferred into your cash account, and you're 50% of the way home on your cash target for the month, overnight while you sleep. I mean, that's a nice deal. So it's that type of thing. That's I think, the keys to this do more business with riskier customers for the same or lower resource. Not an easy challenge.
Yeah, that's a great, really a great opportunity for everyone, right? So we live in a world that's increasingly transparent. So we've got to figure out ways to differentiate our businesses. Jennifer was curious about, if you would adjust anything related to small and medium-sized companies. So we have some smaller companies on the phone today. Is there anything that's less relevant as the size of a company goes down? My initial one that we'll talk a little bit about later, the cloud. So can you give us some other ideas or talk about the cloud?
Well, I want to make sure I understand the question. So, so the question is for a smaller, medium-sized company, kind of which of these trends can they realistically expect to implement? Is that the question?
That's right. That's exactly right. Is there anything, is there anything that you would not even consider because it's a smaller organization? That was the way I would say it.
Yeah, you see, with the smaller organizations, and by definition, smaller volume customers, even though they may be large companies, EDI is off the table. That's, that's kind of an expensive, laborious tool to implement for both parties. So I think that places a premium on the web portals. I think that places a premium on some of the like voicing tools to pick up some of the automation benefits at a lesser cost. And I think, Henry, your mention of the cloud, I mean, what the cloud does, cloud combined with software as a service is a very powerful combination, because then you can enjoy best-of-breed applications, I want to say without an IT staff, but makes it much easier. And Henry, you probably know more about that than I. Do you agree with that statement?
Oh, I would, and especially we're seeing explode. Well, I guess some people wouldn't call it outsourcing, but using outsourced services, combined technology and services in one option. We're going to talk about that a little later. One of the themes you're going to see in credit is electronifying. The next session is about online credit management or accreditation decisioning. Another one is electronic billing, where it's becoming more and more common, especially even amongst the small organizations, to use a third party instead of trying to build applications internally. Now we have access to these.
And you don't have to worry about upgrades and things like that.
Okay, we got another question here from Cindy. She wanted to know about the POs. The POs from our customer are sent directly to sales. Unfortunately, credit rarely sees those POs. How do you suggest the verification of terms be handled without policing each order?
I'm deducing from this question that the orders there's a lot of orders and there's, smaller value. For example, if you're the example I gave you, if you're in the machinery business or the IT equipment business or diagnostic testing business, those orders have to be, each and every one has to be reviewed, closely. What I would say in this case for Cindy is, remember we said the front end of the Casper function, and that's important. So you don't want to be accepting, if you can help it, you don't want to be accepting orders with extended payment terms or unfavorable freight terms, things like that. And so that there needs to be a review process going, and you need senior management support to establish that. In this case, what often serves companies well is to have a policy, and it says payment terms are 30 to 45 days. Anything over 45 days has to be approved by someone outside of sales. Someone maybe in finance or in the general management. That has tested, and Cindy in her role, if she's seeing lots of extended terms being given that are unapproved, she's just got to raise the flag on this and saying, hey, it's a violation of policy, it's hurting us.
All right, we have another question.
Yeah, this one relates more to change management. So what would be your advice for getting new customers or just getting customers on board with new processes and practices?
Well, thinking back to the themes of efficiency and thinking of standardized processes, new customers should, according to those standardized policies and procedures. I would caveat by saying if you're getting into a different segment of customers or a different geographical market, your existing policies and terms may not work. So you'll have to modify those to that segment or market. And you just need to understand that. You just need to establish limits and, investigate credit and administer their accounts in some ways, in the same ways, but with those local or market variations.
Thanks, John. And I think we'll take one final question before we wrap up here with John Salek. The question is, which function of order to cash would you say is the leading candidate for a best-of-breed application?
I would say collections. And the reason, and I say collections, because they generally have impact on cash application, and they generally have a dispute function. So you ask me for which function, and I'm saying there's three. But the good tools will affect more than just the collections function. And the reason I say that is because the benefits are so great. I always say it's like the difference between a single-shot rifle and a machine gun. It just automates so many functions and operations and allows a collections person to have so much coverage and portfolio penetration. And then the results, cash, less bad debt, can be significant. It's just a very powerful tool. That would be my vote.
John, thank you for that. That was very informative. A wonderful kickoff keynote for us to stimulate some thoughts. I think I can see we've got a lot of good thoughts moving based on the number of questions that are coming in. So we asked John to create a broad framework of how we would look at, well, what we used to call billing, what we used to call accounts receivable. Now John has introduced a new term, order to cash. And we believe that's a term that's really going to transform the concepts around billing, collections, payment, cash application, because we don't see it as one function anymore. It's not just a credit function. It's not just a cash app function or a billing function. It's really all one interrelated one. So John, I think you did a great service to show how those fit together.